United Game Night Preview Series, Episode 11, Secrets of the Lost Station with Jim Samartino. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to the Preview Series. Yep, we're really pumping them out now. A lot of good Kickstarters out there. A lot of great stories behind those Kickstarters out there. And we have another one. This one will not disappoint. I can guarantee you that if our conversation from before the recording is any indication. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Jim Samartino from Everything Epic Games. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Jason. Very glad to be on. Hello, everyone.
Hey! So you have a Kickstarter out now, Secrets of the Lost Station. We were going to talk all about that game. If that rings familiar to people, yes, it is the follow-up to Secrets of the Lost Tomb, which a lot of you played and enjoyed and rated and all that good stuff. But before we get into that, we tell stories on this podcast. So, Jim, tell us a story. Tell us about yourself and how you got into gaming.
Sure, absolutely. So I started gaming actually when I was about 5 years old. I got the first video game controller in my hand and started playing with video games, and then gradually, grew up throughout the gaming world, got into collectible card games, and then the president of Everything Epic, Chris, had said, "Hey, there's all those games you played, those Risks and those life games and things like that. Well, let me show you this new kind of game that's out there." And that was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I sat down there, I was like, "Wow, games have really developed. This is really cool. It's like the same thing you would get in a video game, but now we have that human interaction." And I really, really enjoyed that. And we kept playing games for a while, and then Chris and I had an opportunity where we were having script designing sessions. We really loved movies. So we said, you know what? Why don't we combine that storytelling and movies that we love to do and combine that with the games that we love to play? And that's where the birth of Secrets of the Lost Tomb came from.
Okay. All right. And Everything Epic Games is kind of, that was what came first? Was it the Secrets of the Lost Tomb, the Everything Epic Games? Is it kind of one and the same?
Yes, it was actually Secrets of the Lost Tomb. We heard about the Kickstarter that was out there. It was Indiegogo and Kickstarter and several other crowdfunding sources. And we went, wow, that's really the unlock. Now that we have the ability to have the creative power, and between Chris and myself, we have a lot of different skills with writing and acting and video editing and art. So between the both of us, we were able to say, wow, we can make a lot of this. We did a little research and said, we can produce it. Now all we need is the money. And then there was the Kickstarter option. We said, hey, let's put our best foot forward and see what the fans say. We had a great response on Kickstarter, and that created Secrets of the Lost Tomb. We had our taste, and we wanted more. So Everything Epic, as the production company, came out of that.
All right. Once you pop, you can't stop.
Absolutely. We went tomb diving and just kept on going.
All right. So Secrets of the Lost Tomb. So we're not going to talk too much about this game. It came out a couple years ago. You could still get it. Still available in various places. So we're going to talk about it just in the context of setting the scene for Lost Station, because this is kind of number 2 of the iteration. So maybe just tell us a little bit about Lost Tomb, and just so we can kind of get the context for what kind of game system this is.
Sure. So it is a pulp action adventure game for 1 to 6 players. It is cooperatively played, and the tomb takes place in that pulp era of the 1930s, 1940s, World War II era. And it's an adventure game where you have your team of adventurers in a very Indiana Jones-esque tomb diving Men in Black experience, where you go into the tomb, you have to try to stop ancient evils from getting out. At the same time, you need to make sure that people that are from the outside world trying to get those artifacts and interesting items to bring into the world for control, you got to stop them as well. As you're going through, you get items and artifacts and battling creatures, and it's an epic storytelling experience as you go through. It started with the core base game that had 7 scenarios. We ended up writing a total of 22 different stories to go along with that, including an epic campaign that tells you the full secret of the Gorgon's Head comet that appears over the tomb every 113 years, and you get to find out the true secrets behind the lost tomb. But that was only part of the story. While we were creating Secrets of the Lost Tomb, we conceptualized the depth of where the story was going, and that's when we first started thinking about Secrets of the Lost Station. So although Secrets of the Lost Station is just hitting Kickstarter now, we've actually conceptualized that for the last several years.
Okay. And from what I know about the game, so, I mean, it's a dungeon crawler, and, like, that's the most unhelpful term that you can possibly use about a game, because there's, like, a zillion of them. But I think this one, the thing that kind of sets it apart is the narrative. So you kind of said it, like, just kind of talked about all this narrative, like the Lost Comet and the setting and the pulp action, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of mechanisms, it borrows from, what is it, Arkham Horror, Betrayal at House on the Hill. Those are that was the pedigree of this game.
Yes, that had a lot of inspiration for the beginning of the game. It's a modular-based game. One thing we wanted to do is make sure that every single time that you played, you had a high replayability for it. Just as you would watch a movie and love to watch the movie, you can play any game over and over if you really like it, but it's the same every time. With what we did with Secrets of the Lost Tomb and Secrets of the Lost Station is we made it a very modular format where not only can you adjust the difficulty of the game and, of course, the number of players truly from 1 to 6 in both games, but as you play through it, the tiles are different, the character selections are different, the story narratives that you have during the game and the sequence is different every single time that you play. And eerily as it is, it actually tends to meld together in this balancing format where you get a true, unbelievably epic storytelling experience every single time that you play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that game was it 30s, 40s, pulp action, Indiana Jones type stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So then now we're moving far into the future with Lost Station. 1,000 years.
And it's continuing the storyline because we've had a lot of our fans ask us if this is just a slapped-on layer that, hey, you know what, the pulp did well for you. Do you want to just take the same thing and slap that on, a sci-fi version of it? And we're like, sci-fi, absolutely, we absolutely love it, but it's definitely not a slapped-on theme. I mean, we've done other titles like Rambo and Big Trouble, and through the passion that we put into these games, you know that we don't do slapped-on themes. So, again, we started with the storyline back in the 1930s and 40s, but the element, and people don't tend to lose this sometimes, the secret in the main character is the tomb itself. And you only get part of the story, even if you play all 22 stories. The true unlock comes in actually playing Secrets of the Lost Station, where you find about the station and the secrets it holds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're there. We're at the Secrets of the Lost Station. So you have there's some story elements to it, but maybe give a broader overview of the game in terms of not just a theme, but like mechanical integration, how you bring that to life.
Sure, absolutely. So what we did it has a lot of the same mechanics as the Secrets of the Lost Tomb because we wanted to keep that same framework there. But from the people that played Secrets of the Lost Tomb, we had 3-4 years of experience of listening to all of their feedback. So that tile laying, the dice rolling, the way to track the actions, how to manage the reading of the stories and how much narrative to keep in, to have the storytelling, but how to keep it more condensed so you can keep the gameplay moving. All of those things we made sure that we analyzed in Tombs and even streamline that even more in Stations. A simple example is an average turn in the Tombs game is about 3 to 4 minutes long. There's a lot of decisions to make because we made it a very robust game. In this game, it's still robust, but it's much more streamlined. So the turns in this one tend to be closer to 2 minutes to keep the game and much more fast pace as you play through it.
Yeah, I know. I apologize for interrupting
Yep.
I think it was one of the videos on the Kickstarter where it was either you or Chris. I couldn't recognize the voice, but it said we fixed some of the fiddly bits. I love that quote. Fiddly bits, quote unquote. Could you give us a concrete example of some of the fiddly bits that got fixed?
Sure. So a lot of the things that were the fiddly bits were the tokens. Every game needs some kind of token tracking as you play throughout the game, but we really wanted to try to streamline how the playing space was managed. So this is obviously, it's a standee game, but it's mainly designed to be a miniatures-based game. And when I'm playing a miniatures-based game, I don't want a bunch of stuff on the board that distracts me from the immersion I'm trying to have. So what we did in Secrets of the Lost Station is we added this essentially a tarot card size playing card where you put the creatures on that one. Doesn't matter if you're playing the miniature version or the standee version. You place the character card. You'll see it as the damage tracker on the Kickstarter, and you can track the damage based off the numbered creatures on that card. So instead of having to have all the damage tokens and every time you move somebody and having to move the creature as well as all the damage token, which one did I actually attack and getting confused, it's all organized on the side of the playmat, not only organized, but also keeps the game moving that much quicker too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like the stuff on the board, you've minimized that. It looked like the player boards were also a little bit streamlined.
One thing, as an example, is the combat system, because you're mentioning the actual player cards themselves. One thing we added to the player card was a combat score to it. So instead of needing to add up all the different dice pool elements that you used in Tombs, which is fun building a large dice pool up to 20-some die, that was a little bit of an overkill. Some people liked it, but we wanted to make sure that we were appealing to a much larger audience this time. So on this particular one, you're going to be taking your combat score and combining it with your upgrade stat. That simple combination of dice builds your dice pool, and then you are able to roll against the creature. The creature we kept very simple this time, where you don't have to do a lot of math and saying what's its armor rating and what was this rating and what was its courage loss. We kept it even more simplified, where you look at a single combat score for the creature, you compare those numbers from your dice pool roll for your successes, and you know if you took damage or didn't take damage. You resolve the effects based off your courage loss and damage, same for the creature, and move on to the next one. So that's another example of how we help streamline it, both from the characters and the combat.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of people who are listening, I think the one question that goes through people's minds when they listen to these preview series episodes is, I want to know why I should back this game. Why should I back this game? And I think that's a pretty big selling point right there, because Secrets of the Lost Tomb, it has... it kind of definitely stands in that list of dungeon crawlers. It kind of has its own little niche there, but there was that kind of overhead issue, and if this game kind of fixes some of that, then I think you really have something.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing that we really focused on, and you can actually find it on our Kickstarter. It's actually labeled "Why Support This Project," because we had this project that was in development right during Gen Con. So we explained it so many times that we're like, you know what? Let's make sure we can't present it to everyone seeing it on the webpage, but we can have that impression in person. So let's put that same information on the Kickstarter. So we actually put a section on there for you, and it's primarily focusing on why spend money on this game when you have so many others to play or to choose from or to even purchase at the same time. And it's mainly because of the immersion, the expansiveness, and the high replayability that our game has to offer, which really differentiates the franchise from the other games that are out there.
Yes. So I want to talk more about narrative. So narrative, you guys put so much effort into the narrative, and there's a lot of different ways to do narrative. I think when people think, okay, this game has a narrative or has a theme, there's like one approach, and there's a bunch. But before I get into that one a little bit, let me focus on one particular thing that I thought was really cool, which was the station track. So the station track, forgive me if I'm wrong, if I'm misunderstanding, but it's a way to differentiate the different events that come out before everybody's turn. So like in a regular narrative game, I'm thinking Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror, you pull from a Mythos deck, and the Mythos deck it's the same for everybody. But it seems like you've broken it up a little bit. So like depending on where you are in a station track, you pull from a different event deck, quote unquote. So like you might get a personal event, you might get a scenario wide event, you might get, so different things might happen depending on the narrative. Am I getting that right?
That's absolutely perfect. And that's one thing that we wanted to impart on this game. One of the pieces of feedback that we had from Tombs is that it sometimes had the tendency to be a little too random, which random is good for replayability. But if it's too random and you make this epic roll and awesome decisions and strategy, and then just by bad luck it doesn't go anywhere, it's deflating. You want your actions to mean something and bad things to have consequences associated with it. So we did with the station event tracker that you were just describing very well, by the way.
Thank you.
We wanted to
it jumped out at me. Like I'm like, wow, why didn't Because I'm sorry, I'm really excited about this because I play these narrative games, and I feel like when you pull from the deck, one deck, and it just feels like the story is kind of playing me, and I have to put myself in what's being presented. This time, it's like, okay, now my character has something to him. He's the star of the show now. Mm-hmm. And now it's something happened, a scenario wide, or maybe there's like a bunch of different categories of it. I just thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, and one thing that we're doing with that, and it also speaks to the random element being removed as far as just this ambiguous thing happening. It actually matters to your character. When you get that character event, the way it's designed inside of the scenario book is it's actually going to reveal more of your character. Sometimes you're going to get something that's just a random thing that you're a strength guy like Balthazar, and it's going to be a strength-related event. But other times you're going to find out, wow, you have this Dragonic creature that's part of your team. Why? Now you sit down, you play, cool character, I like him, and you move, but you want to know what is behind his character. You get a lot of that depth in finding out why, and there's a lot of really twists that happen in the game, like the show Lost. Chris and I loved watching the story Lost, and we love that idea that you jump in midstream, not knowing the character, but you find out all about them as the story develops.
Which part of Lost did you like? Did you like the first season stuff, where it was just like them on the island, or did you like it when it get like really weird toward the later seasons?
More the first couple seasons when it had the intrigue to it. That was definitely, why is there a polar bear and what's that smoke monster? And that's that we really enjoyed those things. So as you're playing through the track itself, and we time things where when there's a scenario event happening, because it's big and bold. It's the yellow disc that's on the track. Something's coming, but you don't know what it is. When a combat's coming, so this way you don't have to remember, and did we move the creatures this turn? It'll tell you when it's happening, but you don't know what's going to happen while you just know something's going to occur at that event. And then there's random events that happen. Like you said, the station event can happen where everybody's affected, or it's that personal event and it happens specifically to you and to your character. And there's also blank events too, where it can be that, we're safe on this one, and move on to the next one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also, some of the monster spawns or monster activities are tied to the station track as well. So, so like monsters aren't just this kind of automatic thing. It's kind of organically, a lot of these games kind of separate monsters from theme, if that makes sense. So like the monsters kind of act independently, and then the theme is the whatever narrative is happening. It feels like if I'm getting it right, the monsters are kind of triggered according to what happens along the station track or the narrative track. I think that's pretty cool too.
Yep. Yeah, and I can tell you an interesting note about that as well is that with Secrets of the Lost Tomb, when we created that one, we first created the game itself. We were inspired. We knew the theme. We created it. And then we said, which cool creatures and character archetypes can we put into it? What tropes can we use? So we had the game put the characters in it. In Secrets of the Lost Station, because we already knew what the game format was going to be, we very much went in depth with the characters we wanted and the races. And I created a whole bio with Chris on who are these people, what are the races, and what are the political conflicts that will be happening outside of the universe that we're in right now. And that way we're able to have that and then build the game around it, because we already had the framework and we were able to start there, which is why the narrative in this game is even much more robust than anything we've ever done before.
Mm-hmm. So I have this little thing I invented. I think I'm a game designer. I invent things. But like in terms of how to integrate narrative into a game, I call it deductive and inductive story. So like a deductive story would be like something like Arkham Horror LCG or Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, where the story is kind of there, like it's predetermined. The game gives you A, the game gives you where you're gonna go eventually to B, and you kind of figure it out along the way. Like you might use different characters, you might find different things, but ultimately you're playing the same thing, which is that's one way to do theme. And the other way to do theme is kind of this inductive way. So it's like you have a whole bunch of stuff on the board, and every discrete little event happens, and then the player kind of puts it together mentally after the fact, and it's kind of this emergent inductive story. So is that, talk about that. Like, did you consider, the former way of doing it, where it's like, okay, I really want to get the story across, we have a cool thing in mind, let's do it that way? Or did you just really feel really strongly about having that more inductive bunch of events organically combining into a narrative?
The answer to that is yes, and I'll add a third element to what you just described there, and I call it coductive, where it's actually taking the inductive and deductive and combining them in a synergetic manner. Where from a deductive perspective, we know where we wanted to start each campaign and each scenario, and where the overall story arc is, and we also know where each one wants to end. So we have a firm bookend to where we want to start and finish the story. But then everything in between, that's up to the characters. That's why it has a great RPG, choose-your-own-adventure style inductive play.
Okay, so you've done a whole lot of thinking about the narrative stuff. Lest we scare our mechanical friends, we've talked a lot about narrative stuff, and
sure.
I think on the mechanical side, people they see dice, right? And dice kind of scare people, some people away from these adventure games. Like you have your kind of Descent and this type of game, but then you have on the other side you have your Mage Knights and your Gloomhavens, which are very puzzly and card playish, all that kind of stuff. So I guess what do you, in terms of mechanisms, what is the message that you would like to get across to people?
The main thing with the mechanisms is we've learned a lot over the several years and all the different games that we've made, and we know that we want to keep suspense very key. We want your actions to be meaningful, and as you play through the game, we want it to be fast-paced, so every action that you make, everyone's, in a lot of our games, is cooperatively playing together. For the dice, like you said, in most dice games, it's random. You don't know what's going to happen, but in our game, it's more of a probability play. So there's nothings, there's double successes, single successes, and critical failures. That when you know your chance based off the dice, but what you're doing is you're putting yourself into it and saying, okay, out of this many dice that I'm rolling, without being a math wizard, you just kind of have a feeling of, okay, if I do this strategically, is it going to give me an advantage or disadvantage? It's just a Boolean yes or no kind of framework. So you know what you're doing moving into it. The mechanics are simple enough. You don't need to have a lot of math. But at the same time, it's intuitive, where those that like the deep element of strategy, especially cooperatively, or in a solo play, you can really think what your characters are going to do, become that character. You can allow to play that through in the game.
So you brought up solo play. That was my next question. You're inside my head, man. Tell me a little bit about how solo plays out. I mean, it's a cooperative game, so I think the solo co-op thing is a natural. It goes together. So has there been anything done specifically to address the solo experience?
Absolutely. When we made Secrets of the Lost Tomb, we originally made that as a 2 to 6 player game, and we're like, well, we're alienating a very large part of the gaming community. And even if you are primarily a multiplayer type of gamer, there's times, especially in a story-based narrative game, that you can't get a game group together and you just want to play the game. So that's why we developed it into a one-player game. And the same is true for the Secrets of the Lost Station. The one-player game is scalable down, not in a time element. It's still going to give you the full story. It's not watered down, not cut down at all, because everything is based off of an action mechanic, and it's also based off the time. So the difficulty itself on your resources will scale, even if you're playing the one player, but as the game is very well balanced, we give you companions. There's special cards in both tombs and stations that give you a companion benefit. So you're still kind of playing another character without having to manage them. So you get them as a benefit and a resource for the cool things they can do, their abilities that they can unlock, the defensive options they give, without actually having to do rolls and elongate your gaming itself. And when I've actually played with Chris in a lot of our quick test gameplays where we want to just test something out, there's times where we actually play multiple characters ourselves. So he'll pick 2 and I'll pick 2 and we'll play through it. So it's technically a 4-player game, but it's so fast-paced and so intuitive. Even if you wanted to play more than one character on your own, you can also do that.
So just to be clear, you can play one character and go through it.
Absolutely. Yep, and all you need to do is just mix in the appropriate amount that's in of companion cards, and all that is spelled into the book itself. The main thing that is different is when you get to like the boss creatures or the big turn-end battles. That's when we'll say if you have X amount of characters, this many creatures, or this happens within the difficulty setting. If you play with less characters, that's going to change. So that's really the two elements that balance it, is those end battles, how many creatures spawn, to be proportionate to the resources that you have, with the house always having the advantage, because we want to make sure that you really work for the win. But there's always the ability to scale the difficulty if you felt you were overly challenged. And some people are like, I'm great at this, I want the most difficult thing, make it super expert hard. And you have that ability to do it as well.
So
it's really customized gameplay.
Cool. So what happens with a lot of games that have the solo kind of imported is that, so I mean, this is a big box. You're getting a giant box, even if whether you get the standees or whether you get the miniatures or whether you get the expansions. I mean, you're getting a lot of stuff. But with a lot of games, unfortunately, the solo component, you can't, like, a lot of it isn't useful for that particular part of the game. It's almost like in this little ghetto where it has like 1/4 of the boxes solo. You can actually use it for that. So what you're saying is like all the stuff in the box can be used for the solo mode.
Yep, that's absolutely right. It's the companion cards are the big scaling element. So every story you're able to play, any character, you're able to play with it. It's just a matter of selecting your appropriate companion cards to go with the difficulty setting, so your resources are balanced in the difficulty.
All right. So, yeah, that's all my questions. Do you have any other things that we missed, stuff that you wanted to share about the game before we move on?
Just the fact that it's so expansive for just the understanding the levels of the game. There is the core game itself, which has several stories that come inside of it. The Kickstarter also has the ability to have the Undiscovered Pack, which comes along with it complimentary. That adds another 13 elements of story to the game as well. That's for the core game itself. And there's a Kickstarter exclusive of something called the Lycion Chronicus, which is a special thing where Chris and I ourselves, we literally put ourselves into the game. You actually get to play us. We're actually characters within the game. That's one of the Kickstarter exclusives. And people say, we wish you came in the box. And we always tell them, we do. Because we're gamers. We love that kind of thing. And you actually get a special narrative that bridges from the Secrets of the Lost Tomb to the stations through our eyes as characters within the game. So that's just the core pledge. All of that I just mentioned is the core pledge. Then you can get the secondary pledge, which gives you the ability to have the Oblivion Pack, which adds basically the bookending of the end of the saga, and you get to experience all the deep, dark things that happen on the other side of the universe. And then there's the Galaxy Defender Pack, which gives the entire story, the beginning, middle, and end, and that spans across right now, and it's quickly increasing as stretch goals get unlocked, is over 70 different stories that you get to play throughout this. So it's, as we said and promised in the beginning, it's thematic, it's immersive, and it's highly replayable.
And it's heavy.
Yes, so lift with your knees when when it gets delivered to your house.
Poor mailman. So while I have you on, you actually, so that was Secrets of the Lost Station. Please, I hope that this was enough information to back it. I am going to steal a little bit of Jim's time just because I also noticed that you guys are working on, I think, one of my most anticipated games of 2017 when I looked at the beginning of the year, which is Coma Ward. So, please tell me a little bit more about Coma Ward because I'm so looking forward to this.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that you bring that up. Before I tell you anything about Coma Ward specifically, let me tell you about the origin behind Coma Ward, which is incredibly impressive and humbling. Okay. So we work with IGA, and Matt over there is a great guy, and he came to us and said, hey, he knows this other designer that has this great game, and it was inspired by playing Secrets of the Lost Tomb. He really wants you to play it. So we sat down, we played it. It was called Coma Ward. And we were deciding if, as a production company, we wanted to buy it from him. That was his pitch. And after playing this horror-based psychological thriller, we went back and literally slept on it. When I had nightmares that night, I literally walked up to Danny the next day, patted him on the back, and said, we want this game. So the fact that it's like a second generation, Danny Lott's an incredibly in-depth and very talented writer. The game really screams this RPG type depth where he did this great job. And I'll tell you one of the mechanics, but the story itself is you walk into this Coma Ward, and it's not this dirty zombie-based hospital. It's nothing to do with that. It's this clean and sterile, mysterious hospital that you're in. You wake up and you look at your armband, and it says John or Jane Doe. And then you happen to walk out in the hall, and you think of that cold, sterile floor and the bare feet slapping on it. You look around, and you see other people emerging from their rooms at the same time. No one knows why they're there, where they are, who the people in there are about. And you only unlock that by playing through these phenomenons. And as you play through each one of these quests, you reveal more things about yourself and your allies. And as you play through, and everyone's different, as you play through it, you might find that person that you were friends with and allying with the entire time ends up not being your friend at all, and he was actually the bad person. And there's all things that just kind of twist and turn in every single one of these. And again, because it's an Everything Epic game, it's highly replayable, and there's twists left and right, which hopefully will also give you nightmares because it was a lot of fun to play.
And when is that launching on Kickstarter?
That is actually just a few weeks away. That's going to be launching, I believe it's scheduled for October 7th. It's the beginning of October. It's either October 7th or 12th. That'll be launching and running through to the end of the month. We're expecting to have that set, if the timing works out, for a Halloween close.
You did that on purpose, didn't you?
Just a little bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jim. This has been really fun. I think that we've covered everything. If you want to give one last couple shout outs or some last messages about the game, you got a little bit of time right now.
Awesome. Well, I would be remiss, one, if I didn't say thanks to everyone that made this possible. Chris Batarlis, who's also the publisher, co-designer, one of my best friends. We came in this and we love making games. Adrienne Ezel, she was able to be the graphic designer for most of this, was able to bring the graphics to life. We also had Shane Braithwaite. He was our illustrator. He's the one that's responsible for making all those incredibly detailed and creepy characters. John Usaic, excellent 3D modeler. All the room tiles that we have are actually done in 3D, so you really get the depth and design element there. And we had a team of 3D modelers that came along with that. Clint McLean, he did a great job on the characters and the bosses. We also have Alvaro Bandita. He did all of the creatures. And then we have Luciano Comazzano. He was the one who did our personal characters of Ninjas and Captain Chris. We also had Rokio from OK Games that also did the video production. And then, of course, the best person out of the entire project was you, the backers. All the listeners and all those Kickstarter fans out there, we did this for you. Our motto is of the gamer, by the gamer, for the gamer, and we can't make these games without you, and thank you so much for your support.
All right. That is really, really cool to hear. So that was Jim Samartino of Everything Epic Games, and that will do it for another episode of the preview series. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and we'll be back sooner than you think because there's a lot of other awesome Kickstarters out there. So until next time, later, everybody.